Good morning and welcome to Mean Green Game Day as we look ahead to the midway point of the 2021 college football season. UNT fresh off the bye week after a very close game when it comes to La Tech. They were at La Tech last week and nearly pulled off the upset. It would have been a big comeback thanks to Austinani coming in late in the game. I'm joined by Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera to dissect it all, including the nation when it comes to college football. But let's go ahead and stick around with UNT. The attempt last week, did that save head coach Seth Luttrell for now? Because last time that we had the show, we talked that he should have been gone the week before thanks to the previous loss. After that comeback, does he deserve to stay a little longer? Connor.
Well, you know things aren't going well when you lose a game in a fashion to where it's almost like moral victories, and that's where UNT is right now. And I understand that we played against a tough Louisiana Tech team on the road. UNT has won 1 of their last 10 road games. Now here's another little nugget about that game. Louisiana Tech didn't even have the starting quarterback. UNT fell behind 24-0 early, and then they fought well for the rest of the point of the game. About midway point of the second quarter, looked great from that point forward, lost 24-17. So we lost in a good fashion, but again, if you're at the point where you're losing games and you're looking at them like, but at least we're getting better, that's like those small little minor moral victories. And so I don't think that this necessarily saves Luttrell, but at least it gives us, it improves the psyche of the players, especially with the bye week and going into a game today in which I think UNT players may be feeling a little bit better about now.
I think he's right on a lot of that. I do not think having a losing record, though, in the state of Texas is a good thing. I think it honestly just puts a nail in the coffin and is not a good thing for anyone. I think that we have established a quarterback, though, with Ani. I don't think we plan on going anywhere else, so we'll see how that goes.
Rachel, you mentioned a good point. Jace Reuter had started again last game, and he went 3 of 10 for 13 yards. No interception this week, so let's celebrate the small victories. But Austinani comes in, and he's 12 of 27, 79 yards, and a touchdown, including that 4th down conversion late in the game. So, Mark, what do you take with Austinani? Do you think he's starting from here on out?
I think he should be. You know, it's very showing that he is the better quarterback this so far, especially when Reuter's throwing an interception almost every game. But he didn't, as you mentioned. But I think Ani's the way to go. I think he puts the offense more at ease. I think the coaches trust him more to open up the playbook, and he just looks more comfortable in the pocket, and he's able to deliver the deep ball better than Reuter was.
Connor, do you think that the wait is over? Reuter is to be sidelined. Go with Austinani. He can only grow with more snaps.
I'm going to use an analogy here, another situation similar to this. Several years ago, LSU had a quarterback controversy. Came into the season 2014. They had an established starting quarterback based on experience with Anthony Jennings. He struggled early on in the season, and then they put in Brandon Harris. And I think, and Brandon Harris gave the LSU team their psyche certainly improved with the players. They seem to be more energized. Here's what I think UNT should do. I'm going to go kind of out in left field here, if you will. I think they should put in the freshman quarterback, Bryce Drummond. When I look at the 2 quarterbacks between Austin Ani and Jace Reuter, there hasn't really been much of a difference. It's not like one guy is like, oh my gosh, thank gosh we have him in now. It's almost like, well, let's see what this guy does, and let's see if this guy's better on this particular day. If you put in a guy like Bryce, I think it could provide an extra sense of optimism for the team. It could give them a new energy where it's like, and even as a fan, if you saw Bryce go into the game, you would say, oh my gosh, let's see what Bryce can do. Let's go, guys. The players would feel the exact same way. And I think knowing our next few games are going to be likely losses regardless of who plays quarterback, I would say start the new guy. Provide that new if you will, that new energy that would give a big boost to the players.
Rachel, he mentioned Bryce there, but you also have a 3rd-string quarterback who's been competing for that starting role for a few years now, and that's Kason Martin. Kason Martin, he had a bowl game just a couple years ago and came out of the second half, started the second half, first play, 75-yard touchdown pass. So do you think Kason Martin even comes into the questioning when it comes to, hey, I deserve to be a starter as well?
I think that is a correct statement. I wouldn't start Bryce right now, though, because you're throwing him to the fire, and I don't think you should throw a guy into the fire. But I think you should at least consider Kason because he's done everything that you can, and I think he is a considerable quarterback. But I wouldn't throw anyone immediately into that fire. I would keep Ani in there. He's the most experienced we have as a quarterback in college. I think you have to keep who you have in there as of right now.
And I don't think we're meaning to, like, he's starting next week. It's more of exactly what we've experienced every week. We haven't had one starting quarterback stay the entire game. So when things do go wrong, now you don't go from Reuter to Ani, you go from Ani. Who fills that second blank? Mark.
I honestly don't think that you should switch Ani. I think Ani should be the quarterback for the rest of the year unless he gets hurt, obviously. But I think once you start mentioning and throwing in quarterbacks that haven't even played, it messes with the psyche of the team. It's just showing that coaches don't really know who to play and what to do. Because once you're throwing in a freshman quarterback that hasn't had a snap yet, it's not going to work out very well, like Rachel said. You're going to throw him into the Wolves, and either he's going to perform well and we have our new quarterback, or he's going to regress tremendously and become Chase Reuter. It's just not and that's a risk that I don't think Seth Luttrell is willing to take, and that's a risk as a fan I don't want them to take. I think they should stay with Ani because he's proven that he has the most experience. He's the best capable quarterback we have. And I think that we should just stay with Ani at this point.
I think that's the majority opinion. Now, one thing that I've looked at is that third and fourth down percentage when it comes to UNT offensively, that's where they struggle. On third down, UNT is 36.3% successful, and on fourth down, they're 15% successful. What that means is that UNT is unsuccessful when it comes to first and second down. They are incapable of setting themselves up for a good third down or fourth down yardage. Mm-hmm. So what's going wrong on first and second down?
Well, I think it has to do with the questionable quarterback play so far, and you also have to look at the wide receiving core. They've had a lot of injuries. So you haven't been able to establish a passing game. So what that does, and UNT's had a good running game, but now defenses adjust to that, knowing that UNT is going to come out to try to run the football on the early downs and the early distances, and now UNT is becoming more predictable on offense, and that's going to put you in those certain long situations, and it makes it difficult for any offense.
I think UNT really needs to consider going to the tight ends. Both of them are quite experienced, and they have the momentum that you need. And since the wide receivers aren't doing anything, I mean, you have to try something. Anything's better than nothing at this point. So I would go try and do some tight end work and see what they can do rather than wear wide receivers who haven't been able to do much the first few weeks.
So something that really plagued UNT last season was penalties, and that's defense, offense, special teams, you name it. Penalties were the driving point to a lot of the unsuccess that UNT had last season. This year, the penalties are still there, but they are less. But I've noticed that there are 12 total, not average, hopefully not, 12 penalties for UNT on first down. So you're backing yourself up to a first and 15 or a first and 20 compared to a first and 10. Mark, what does that do to an offense?
Well, it limits them play calling wise, and you're kind of focused more. If you're the defense playing UNT, you're focused more on the pass game or a screen coming right there, because that's usually what UNT runs, is either a quick screen or an RPO right up the gut. They're being a very predictable offense, and as you said, the penalties are just killing them. If they get if DeAndre Torrey rips off a 15-yard run, it'll come back with a holding call. Right? It's not working out for them at all, and it messes with the psyche of the team. And the O-line is just starting to get in shambles right now because they don't know whether they need a pass block on first and 20, set a screen, and then go after a linebacker on first and 20, or run the ball up the gut. It's not working for them.
And you can't shoot yourself in the foot. You can't have those penalties. I mean, you hear coaches talk about that all the time, and you even hear the commentators when, like I remember when Arizona State played BYU a couple of weeks ago, which has been Arizona State's only loss to this point. They had a couple of penalties late in the game that were setting them back, and they were looking to have a game-winning drive in the fourth quarter, and they had some false start penalties that set them in a more difficult position to try to pick up that first down. And that's what UNT has had problems with this season. And you can't have those mental breakdowns and shoot yourself in the foot. You want to try to make your life as easy as possible.
Well, we'll see if UNT can collab these things together and put it against a tough opponent today in Missouri. But when we return, we're going to go ahead and dissect the rest of the league and our predictions for the top 4 in the nation. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Now we will dissect the top 4 teams, or predictions rather, of our top 4 teams heading into the national tournament. Obviously, this is only the halfway point. These things are subject to change, but for at the moment, Alabama, they are going to remain number 1, and that's the majority opinion. It's Alabama. That defense, Bryce Young, and the offense, things are clicking. Obviously, it's Nick Saban's team. Things are going to stay the same. Now, a team that's not really surprising, but has officially jumped, and that is the defense that we've seen a few years ago, but they're back. It seems to be stronger than ever, and that's Georgia. Georgia just stifling teams when it comes to the defensive side of things, and so I think they will be able to lean to their defense, and that'll push their way up to the top 2 in the nation. Number 3 is going to be Cincinnati, the Bearcats, out of the top 10 starting this season, and now here they are making their way to the top 4. Desmond Ridder accounted for all 3 touchdowns when it came to Notre Dame last week in the win, and likely Heisman favorite and potential top 10 pick in the NFL 2022 NFL draft. So he's definitely so the offensive side of things there. So it'd be different if we were able to see Cincinnati and Georgia eventually play each other with a stifling defense and the high-powered offense that the Bearcats bring. And then finally, I'm going to go with Penn State. This is a team where they have a huge game today against one of the nation's top defenses as well, and that is Iowa. And it's at Iowa today, so I definitely have Penn State, though, taking this out. I think the offense will find a way and be able to take away a win from one of the hardest places to win, and they'll be able to ride that way through the end of the season. So that's my take. Rachel, let's go ahead on you. Who are your top 4?
My top 4, I'm going to start first with Georgia. I think Georgia wins the SEC. I think they beat Bama. Smart will be the first assistant to beat Alabama. And I think they just have such a great defense. I mean, they've only allowed 23 points. And you have 2 great quarterbacks between Daniels and Bentley, and either are great, and then Clemson it's a great statement win. Number 2, I go with Penn State. Penn State has done very well. I think they're going to win the Big Ten tournament. They have a solid defense. They make the plays that are needed. They have a great run game. Sean Clifford has done not too bad. There's a few things that he could fix, but other than that, Alabama, I think Alabama's going to lose the SEC title, but I think they still end up in 3rd. They still get in because they are Alabama. They only have 1 loss this season so far, and that's what I will go with. And then finally, Cincinnati, they'll be the first group of 5. Great quarterback play, and I just think it's going to be hard to stop them this year.
Newsflash, I'll have Alabama at number 1. I know that they lose X amount of players every single year to the draft and graduation, and they lose X amount of coordinators. But until Nick Saban is no longer the coach in T-Town, I'm going to continually predict Alabama to make the playoff. And for this season, I think they're going to find a way to finish number 1 because right now, Nick Saban is undefeated against former assistants. Now, Rachel, you mentioned earlier that you think Georgia might have a chance to finally end that winning streak for Nick Saban and Kirby Smart more specifically. And I think if there's ever been a year for that to happen, it looks like it could be this year's Georgia squad. So Bama at number 1. Number 2, let's go with the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, I know they haven't looked great this season, but the fact of the matter is, until someone in the Big 12 dethrones Oklahoma, I'm going to continually predict them to make the playoff. Now, maybe not win when they get to the playoff, but ultimately get there. At number 3, let's go with the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, at number 3, because they would, in my opinion, lose to Alabama in the SEC championship, which would bump them down to number 3 from number 2, and then it would slot Oklahoma at number 2. And plus, they're not going to bump Georgia to number 4 because they don't want Bama and Georgia to play once again. And then at number 4, I'm going to have the Cincinnati Bearcats. This was actually one of my bold takes that I made way back in the preseason. But I think the Bearcats can be the first Group of 5 team to make the playoff this year. And they've already had 2 huge non-conference victories, both on the road, both by 2 possessions against the Hoosiers and against the Fighting Irish.
My top 4. Number 1, I think I have to put Georgia. Georgia is the most impressive team I've seen this year in college football. Their defense is head and shoulders above anything I've ever seen. They're looking like early 2000s Miami type defense. They haven't allowed 900 yards in the entire season yet, and they've only given up 2 touchdowns all season. So they're number 1 to me. Number 2, I have to pick Iowa. They are the second best defense in the nation. They've caused 16 turnovers already, which is on pace to set a record, and their offense capitalizes from that defense. Number 3, I have to give it to Alabama because it's Alabama. They have a great offense, great defense. Bryce Young is a Heisman candidate, and they're Alabama. Number 4, I have to go with Cincinnati, who I've been high on all year, and Desmond Ridder is the Heisman favorite, and he's going to be a great quarterback for a professional team very soon. And they, like Connor said, they've knocked off 2 great teams on the road, being Indiana and Notre Dame.
So Georgia statistically is the number 1 defense in the league, and to a few of y'all's picks, they're going to be the number 1 team, period. So we'll see if that stays the same. But Georgia, a lot of their talk is their defense, and they've lost a lot when it comes to offense, but they're still getting the job done. Running back Zamir White, he had 2 touchdowns and a recovered block punt for a touchdown against Arkansas last week. What do you think of his performance so far, Connor?
Well, when you look at this Georgia running core every single season, they're just stacked there. And you look across the board. I mean, I know the reputation for Georgia is offensive line and defense, but you look at the skill position they've been able to get the last few years with Kirby Smart, who's done a tremendous job recruiting, especially the South and that Northeast coast with the Carolinas. Georgia's recruiting is actually even getting better, which is a scary thing. And speaking of scary things, their offense has yet to even meet their ceiling because, as you mentioned, Zachary, they've had injuries in the preseason, and a lot of those star players haven't even played this season. And they've been dominating opponents with their backup quarterback. So it's scary to think about when JT Daniels comes back, their starting quarterback, and when all the receivers come back. And like you mentioned with Zamir White, they're loaded, and we already know what they're capable on defense. This Georgia team's ceiling this season is just scary good.
Rachel, do you think that, I mean, obviously you have Georgia at number 1, and that's heading into the playoffs. Do you think if all the players are able to get back, JT Daniels, the receiving core, you have Zamir White going off, with that stifling defense, are they able to compete and potentially win, in the end, the national title this year?
I think they're a terrifying team. If you're any team out there and you're looking for a team to beat, this is the team to beat. Georgia beat what people would call Clemson, and Clemson would have been predicted on a lot of people's schedules in this top 4. So seeing that they aren't in this top 4 and Georgia took them out, you cannot sleep on Georgia. But I think Alabama's just as good. I just don't think their defense has the capabilities.
Mark, you have Iowa sitting at number 2 in the nation. Or sorry, you have Iowa sitting at number 2 in the playoffs. Iowa right now, they have a big game today against Penn State. They're coming off a big game against Maryland. You had Talia Tagovailoa, who has a 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. 10-to-1. And yet, Iowa intercepts him 5 times. 7 turnovers in total. I mean, we were talking about Georgia's defense. Iowa and the Hawkeyes, man, they have it set for themselves as well. And for the national poll, Iowa is set to go 4th this year. So they are set to make the playoffs. What do you make of Iowa and just their defense, just all-around look?
Like I was saying, I think Iowa's the second-best defense in the nation. The way they cause turnovers is insane. They're on pace, which is the record is 38. They're on pace to break that tremendously. Iowa's offense is also very good. Their running game is stout, and they're known for having great offensive linemen, and their offensive lineman gets a great push. Their running backs don't get touched till the second level every play when it comes to a run. And like you said, they had an amazing win during Maryland. I remember I was on the plane heading to Boston watching that game, and I was just very, very impressed of how dominating they were against the Maryland team that was supposed to give them a really good game on a primetime level, and they beat them. Was the score 50-something to 10? I was looking at like a very stout team.
And what's interesting about Iowa and Georgia's defenses is Georgia does it from like an athleticism standpoint. They come after you. They'll blitz 6-7 guys. They'll play press man coverage. And no matter the down in the distance, Iowa plays in their base defense. I don't care if they're if the team is on Iowa's 1-yard line or if they're on their own 1-yard line. It's the same Iowa defense. They keep everything in front of them. But when they get the opportunity, they're going to force that turnover, whether it's been from tip passes from the defensive line, linebackers getting in the quarterback's face, forcing a missed time throw, and the defensive back makes a play on it. This is a senior-laden Iowa back into their defense, and they're certainly playing like it with the situational awareness as they usually do. And also, Iowa's, I think it's 24, 25 straight games where they've held the opposing team to 24 points or less, which is an incredible feat when you think about all the offenses today.
Yeah, 7 takeaways last week. Unreal. See if they can transition that to this week's game against Penn State. We'll go over that later on in the show. But who's your MVP? Who's the luckiest team? Who's the unluckiest team? We'll dissect all that when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. As mentioned before, we've hit the mid-season way of the season. Now, it's time to hit some superlatives, if you will. So, Connor, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What do you have for us?
Well, I talked about the Georgia's team's ceiling with their talent this season. When you look at the rest of their regular season schedule, playing in the SEC East Division, you think about the East. You got Vanderbilt, Tennessee, South Carolina, Missouri, all struggling. Kentucky's having a breakthrough season, but they're obviously not at the level that Georgia is. And then Florida, who just lost to Kentucky at Kentucky for the first time in years. Georgia is by far and away the best team in the SEC East, and that's without a lot of their starters on offense, which again is a scary thought. So you look for the rest of the regular season slate up until they're likely to face Alabama in Atlanta for the SEC championship. Georgia's most difficult game is going to be today, cross-division game in the Plains against Auburn, and yet they're a 2-touchdown favorite in the game again without a lot of their starters on offense. So Georgia, given again their talent and their ease of their schedule, I think they are the most likely to succeed from this point forward in the regular season.
I think Georgia's defense, off of that, Georgia's defense has been one of the most talented teams out there. They've only allowed 23 points this entire season, averaging 5 points per opponents. They've had 2 shutouts this year. The most amount of points they've allowed was to South Carolina and yards with 13 points and 310 yards. It is a scary team. I would not want to be wanting to go against them. And with them just being so dominant, they've averaged 180 points to the other team, but other than that, this is just going to help them win against Alabama.
Boy, that defense. 13 is the most you've given up. I mean, scary. Mark, who's your MVP?
No disrespect to Georgia's defense. They're amazing. I talked about them last block. My MVP has to be Desmond Ridder. He's led Cincinnati to a 5-0 record, beat Temple 52-3 last night, actually. And he's been balling. He's thrown for over 12,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's definitely the Heisman favorite. I think Desmond Ridder, he's the leader of that Cincinnati team, which is going to push them right into the playoff spot.
That
So-
group of five respect, I like that.
So we have a lot of positivity that we've had of who's really standing out in a positive way, but who's the sore thumb? Who's the most disappointing that we've seen, Connor?
There's been a few teams I think you could qualify for that, whether it be North Carolina or Wisconsin, but I'm going to go with the Miami Hurricanes. The Miami Hurricanes, remember last year, had a breakthrough season with a few of their star transfers, including Derek King at quarterback. In the season against Oklahoma State in the bowl game, Derek King goes down with an ACL injury. He's out for several months. But the positive news, at the end of that game the next day, all the players from Miami, including Derek King, announced they're coming back for this season. So Miami was calling it the run it back year. So Hurricane fans were thinking, oh my gosh, we might be back, at least for this year. And they had one of the more manageable schedules in the country this season. And what have they done? Well, the loss to Bama will give them an excuse for that. But they've lost 2 games at home against 2 teams in the preseason they were heavily favored to beat. And we still have more than half the season to go, and they already have 3 losses. And this was a team that was projected to win about 9 or 10 games. To me, given all the guys they had coming back in the super senior year, the talent, especially with Derek King at quarterback, who's been in and out due to injury, this has just not been the year that Miami fans were hoping for. And, you know, it's one of those teams that the media likes to hype up. So for me, they've been one of the more disappointing teams in the country.
When the talent is there, do you think it goes down to the mental side of things and you look at your schedule and you say, oh boy, Alabama to start? It should be a no-brainer that you have a good chance to lose that game. But the fact that they did lose in the fashion that they did, do you think because the talent is there, that's not a question. It comes down maybe to the mental side of things, that are we good enough, and potentially that's why they're having more of a lackluster season.
Yeah, and when you lose in the fashion that they did against Alabama, like you mentioned, it's not like they lost in a competitive 10, 14, 17 loss where they're in there for a majority of the game. I mean, it was 27-0 like that. And this was a team, again, in Miami who was getting hyped up. And we've talked about in the past how Nick Saban's Alabama defenses sometimes will struggle against those dual-threat quarterbacks. Well, everyone was pointing at Alabama in another reloading year. Miami brings everyone back. They've got Derek King. He's a dual-threat quarterback. And the way that they lost, and then you barely beat Appalachian State the following weekend, yeah, it has an effect with the psyche on the team. But I've heard with some people within the Miami program, they think it goes more to the coaching. So it's going to be interesting what the coaching situation is like in Miami in the next couple of months.
Plenty of dots to fill, but Mark, go ahead and list your disappointing.
My most disappointing was also in the ACC. I think it has to be Clemson. You know, Clemson was coming into the season ranked number 3 in so many people's playoff predictions, and now after losing to NC State, they're not even ranked anymore. You know, and the offensive struggle is real for Clemson because Clemson, they're known for having a high-powered offense after having Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, and now DJ Uiagalelei. He looks like he's panicking in the pocket as soon as the ball hits his hands. The O-line can't block for him. The defense is solid, but they're still not making the plays that they need to make in order to win. Yeah, it's pretty much.
Wow, perhaps a few rebuilding years rather than a reload, and so we'll see how Clemson transitions from that. But Rachel, go ahead and give maybe perhaps like a surprising team that surprised this year.
I gotta give this surprising team credit. I didn't think they'd be doing it this well at this time of the year. I gotta give it to Arkansas. Last 2019, 2018, UNT beat Arkansas, and most of us remember that famous play for a lovely touchdown in the end. But they ended that year 2-10. They ended the next year 2-10. Last year they ended 3-7, and somehow this year they've started 4-1. Their only loss to Georgia. But I mean, for Arkansas fans, this is something they haven't seen in a long time. The last time Arkansas had a winning season was 2016 and 2017. This year so far, they've beat Texas 40-13, and they've beat A&M, which are things that haven't happened in a long time. So Arkansas fans are finally seeing this potential team that can even possibly, in the future, not now, look at an SEC title game.
And this team, as soon as they beat Texas, everyone thought it was Texas's fault. Arkansas is legit. I mean, they come out and put on another dominant display against A&M. not at Arkansas where I thought it was going to be. Then you have the home crowd and a whole lot of factors into the Arkansas offense and defense and how they run. But this team even put up a good shot against Ole Miss. Ole Miss, definitely had a blowout win, but the fact that they were playing well up to that point. So Arkansas, I think they're a great team looking forward. But Mark, what's the luckiest team that you've seen so far this season?
I know Rachel's going to be upset with me, but I think the luckiest team, it has to be Oklahoma. Yeah, I'm going to discredit their win against Western Carolina. They won 76-0, and that has been Spencer Rattler's best game so far. Other than that, anytime they've played a team that is in the FBS, they haven't beaten them by more than 7 points. They haven't looked impressive on offense. On secondary-wise, they haven't looked impressive. The only thing they've looked impressive on is their running defense. But Spencer Rattler, I think, is the most overrated quarterback coming into college football this season. Discrediting that Western Carolina game, he has only thrown 5 touchdowns, but he has also thrown 4 interceptions. That is not Heisman worthy. And the drop off from coming from Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and then Spencer Rattler. I think Oklahoma has been the luckiest team, and I don't want to give up. No, I think they'll lose today against Texas. I really do. So I think the luck is about to run out for the Sooners.
Well, Connor, I'm going to actually go ahead and hit you real quick for Rachel. But Connor, you actually have Oklahoma as number 2, and you mentioned that you won't change that until you see something happen by the Big 12 championship game. But what you're seeing out of OU right now, this is not the most strongest that they've been. What do you take on them?
Yeah, and honestly, Mark mentioned this earlier with Clemson. I think what we are seeing right now in college football is a situation with the super senior season and how it's playing into this year. Every single year, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma have a lot to replace. Now, it's reloads, usually for them. But what usually happens in a normal year of returning production is that everyone else has to replace a good amount of players. But what happens when those 4 teams, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, still have a lot to replace, but everyone else gets to bring back everyone? It doesn't guarantee those 4 teams losses, but it certainly makes their season a lot more difficult, and they may not look as invincible as they usually do. So I think it's an accumulation of those super senior factors that's playing into the reasons on why those 4 teams aren't looking as dominant as they are. But again, like you said, with Oklahoma, until someone dethrones them in the Big 12, I'm not going to have someone taking them down until Oklahoma proves to me that they're capable of losing to a Big 12 team.
Rachel, do you have a rebuttal or?
I think the game will speak for itself. But I think the best game this year so far, and maybe I'm not including the Red River rivalry, but I think the best game so far, you got to look at Oregon versus Stanford. Stanford took the game in overtime, and they defeated a top 3 team with Oregon. They ended up winning this game with no time on the clock. Oregon had a penalty. I mean, the touchdown pass ended up being a one-handed catch. They brought them to overtime. They ended up winning overtime with a touchdown. And it's going to ruin the Pac-12, though, with college football playoff predictions. But other than that, I think a good game is always worth having this type of scenario for.
Mark, we will always talk about what this does to a ranked opponent. What does this do for Stanford with this big win?
I think Stanford, it shows that, Stanford's always had a very good program when it comes to being in college football. I think it just shows that anybody is beatable this year, unless you're Georgia. But anybody is beatable this year, especially when it comes to going into the playoff and bubble teams and teams that need signature wins like Oregon, like Cincinnati, like Iowa, like Penn State. They need to bring their A game every single week or they're going to get knocked off.
Well, we'll see exactly how things shape up this year. A lot of good superlatives for the first half. We'll see how things go, if similarities presume, in the second half of the season. But when we return, we're going to dissect UNT football. I have a big test this week against the Missouri Tigers. Tigers, Eagles. We'll dissect it when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. UNT is set to square off at the Missouri Tigers, a Missouri team who struggled this year, but so have the Mean Green. So we'll see who is able to take the win out of today's matchup. But these two teams have only played each other only one other time, and this actually dates back all the way to 1995. It was actually a season opener between the two, and 28-7, Missouri goes on top of that one against UNT, and that was the first natural grass game at Mizzou since 1984, tailback Brock Olivo, he had 260 rushing yards against the Mean Green. 260 in the 28-7 win. And UNT, they're 1-0 under head coach Seth Luttrell when it comes to SEC teams, and that dates back to 2018 44-17 victory at Arkansas. 44-17 at Arkansas. So you have a 1-0 record in the SEC. We'll see if they can take that into a struggling Missouri team. Now, this is Missouri's first non-conference game of the season. Now, guys, I want to go and talk this over. UNT, so I mentioned that there were 260 rushing yards the last time these two teams faced, and it was due to Missouri's running back. Well, how the turntables. Missouri's rushing defense ranks dead last in the nation, 130th, while DeAndre Torrey for the Mean Green is ranked number 15th in the nation. So the rushing side of things, we talked the quarterback in the beginning, the rushing side of things has a chance to really take an upper hand at Missouri. Connor, do you agree?
Yes, obviously the matchup favors UNT heavily with our offensive line against the Missouri defensive line. What you mentioned, Zach, Missouri's defensive line has been the worst at stopping the run in the country, and it's by far. Zach, you mentioned the 260 yards statistic from 20 years ago. Well, the second to last rushing defense in the country for this season is Bowling Green, and they sit at 260 yards giving up per game. The last place team is Missouri, and they give up 50 yards more than that per game at just over a 300-yard clip, which is honestly sad for a defense to be giving up that much in football, because I don't care who you play, they're going to be running it down your throats. And UNT has the players and the matchup to be able to do that today with the UNT offensive line against this Missouri defensive line. Now, here's what I am going to say. I don't know if Seth Luttrell is willing to slow down the tempo for UNT's offense to stay on the field and keep the Missouri offense, which is their strength, off the field. Because I know Seth Luttrell loves to speed up things offensively. And the way this game favors UNT, if it does, is our offensive line against the Missouri defensive line, which means play, keep away. That's our best chance in this game. But I don't know if Luttrell will do that.
Rachel, I want to take it to you. So when it comes to the rushing side of things, do you think that will hold out more than the UNT defense? And they've struggled a little bit in weeks past. Now they're coming off of a 24-17 loss, but they've done very well when it comes to getting turnovers. So Missouri's offense, they're good, but their defense is horrible. UNT's defense has done mediocre compared to a struggling offense. So do you think how will these match out?
I mean, I'm very hopeful for the Mean Green. I think on turnovers, as long as we're able to capitalize on those and be able to do what we can, I think that would be the best thing for us. I want to see Torrey do well. I want to see people come into this game and just do what they can. I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to win this game, but I think if we're able to give the best effort, we can at least beat the point spread.
Mark, I want to go ahead and take it to you. What are your key players or key moments looking forward to this game?
First of all, shout out to the crew for digging in the archives for finding that highlight tape from 1995. That was great. Key players, obviously you got to go with the regular key players for UNT: Austin Awney, DeAndre Torrey, Roderick Burns, Deion Noville. But some key players that are in Missouri that we need to stop is the quarterback Connor Bazelak. He's thrown for over 1,500 yards, which he ranks 8th in college football. He's a 67 completion percentage. He's thrown for 3 touchdowns. He has been getting a little careless with the ball with 5 interceptions. But I do think that is one key player to watch, and then one key player that the defense needs to key on and stop.
And to piggyback off of that, With Bazelix, sometimes he gets a little bit too aggressive in the pocket. He tries to force things down the field. If UNT were to try to play in a phone booth and keep the ball away from Missouri, I could totally see a scenario where if UNT dominates the time of possession and the few times Missouri's offense is on the field, if Bazelix is trying to get a little bit over the top, right, try to hit the defense with the big play, if he gets too aggressive, UNT could force a turnover, which has been one of the UNT's defensive strengths this season, which is forcing turnovers. Again, if we play in a phone booth in this game, try to keep the ball away from Missouri, it's adding up to be a game like Rachel said. The spread right now is 19. It could be a scenario where you see UNT cover that spread, where UNT is coming off a bye, Missouri's coming off that disappointing loss at Tennessee, and next week, Missouri gets Texas A&M. So this is an interesting spot to say the least.
So you go back to 2018 where it was a 44-17 blowout at Arkansas and a very high-tempoed, fast-paced offense. The defense looked good. And now we're trying to change the course of history, and that is slow things down. Do something that you haven't done all year. Slow things down, limit the turnovers, gain the time of possession, because you know your defense won't be able to hold when it comes to the secondary, won't be able to hold this high-powered offense when it comes to passing the football. So how do you think that's going to change, going from you're 1-0 in the SEC because you did this. Now you're rewriting a brand new script. Do you think they can do that in a turnaround now they've had 2 weeks to prepare?
I mean, they've had 2 weeks. They have had the time. They've done the things. I think that that UNT needs to look at throwing to the tight ends more. I think that Pirtle would make a big difference in this game. And I think someone to watch out for Missouri would be senior running back Tyler Beatty. He ended up getting he hasn't had that much yards, but he has had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And if you can limit their touchdowns and keep it to just field goals, that could be a huge difference for the team in general and everyone's mindset, because a field goal is so much better than a touchdown.
Mark, with the loss that UNT had when it comes to the running back side of things, Siggers is gone. Oscar Attaway is hurt. Now, here we are, DeAndre Torrey, 15th in the nation. He averages 129 yards a game. UNT averages 207 yards total when it comes to rushing the football. Austin Nani had 59 yards rushing. This is a guy that likes to run as well. So do you think we are completely ripping out, now that we want to slow the game down, do you think we are completely ripping out throwing the football? We don't want any more interceptions, and just stick straight to the run, slow the clock down, you know it works, and just stay in between the tackles?
Obviously, you can't get rid of the passing game completely like that, but I do think we do need to focus a ton on the run this week. If we focus on the run and get the ball away from Connor Bazelak, we are able to win this game. Now, I'm not saying we will, but we are definitely able to if we just run that clock, beat them down. Their defense is not good. If we are able to beat them down in the trenches and keep it within the sticks, we are able to win this game.
We talked about it earlier in the show. Stay out of those third and longs. So run the football, no penalties in early down situations. Get those positive yards in the first down. Get yourself into second and manageables where you can keep the defense off balance to where you may not even have to be in a third down. And if you are, it's third and so short, you can literally do a quarterback sneak or like a little dive up the middle, and you should be able to get a few yards against what's been a very questionable Missouri run defense. But to piggyback off of what Mark is saying, I think offensively, like I just said, game plan. Stay in manageable third down situations. And on defense, keep everything in front of you. If you, again, play the game in a phone booth, and that's what that means. You play the base defense, don't allow any big plays, you play within yourself, and offensively, you don't get behind the chains. And we have a legit shot of staying in this game.
And this Mizzou team, actually, they keep their games tight. A lot of their games are very close. Their Central Michigan game, 34-24. Kentucky, 35-28. Boston College, 41-34. They are very like La Tech. And we were capable of beating La Tech if we followed that same game plan. So I think if we keep it in a phone booth, like Connor says, we're able to stay in this game with Mizzou.
Well, hopefully we'll see a second half UNT La Tech game rather than the first half going down 24-0. UNT and Missouri later on today. We'll see how the UNT Mean Green fare and see if they can go 2-0 when it comes to SEC opponents under head coach Seth Luttrell. When we return, we'll go over some big game predictions, and there are some big ones, including the Red River Showdown. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Some big games and matchups upcoming for today. In fact, some that are actually going on right now. A game that's happening right now, the Red River Showdown. Now, this is a cast and crew-wide thing. We made it our predictions beforehand. We do not know the score of the game, so this is completely genuine of what we think will happen today. Now, Texas OU, a lot of good things for both sides. OU, they're a little lax this year than in recent years. They're still a great dynamic team as a whole. Texas coming off a scare against TCU. Texas, I'm going to go out on a limb. They take it this year. They are going to snap their 3-game losing streak against the Sooners, and they will take it. Casey Thompson will be able to do enough passing the football. Bijan Robinson, he will be able to go off. So that's my prediction for Texas OU. Rachel, who you
I
got?
completely disagree with him. It's Oklahoma all the way. The Oklahoma defense is going to be able to contain Robinson, and if that happens, I see a win for Oklahoma, and I see another run to that Big 12 championship.
How about this? We're coming into the Red River Showdown with the Oklahoma defense really being the talk of the town. And, well, their offense has been some of the talk of the town, but it's been on the negative side of things. So this has been an Oklahoma defense with their run defense really being the story coming into this. And you got the Texas running game with Bijan Robinson. To me, I got Oklahoma winning this game. But this is always one of those games where it feels like it's anyone's game at any point in this game. I don't care if Texas has a 3-touchdown lead. Oklahoma will come back and tie it. I don't care if vice versa. If Oklahoma has a 3-touchdown lead, Texas will come back and tie it. It's just one of those rivalry games where it goes back and forth. I think you're going to see some points in this game, but I think Oklahoma finds a way to win. However, I will say this. Whenever this season I have predicted Texas to lose, they win. So if you're a Longhorn fan, that might be a good sign for you that I'm picking the Sooners in this game.
I love it. Mark, 2 Sooners, 1 Texas. Who you got?
I'm rolling with you, Zach. I'm going with Texas. You know, Bijan Robinson, he's going to be a very difference maker today. I hope we do get to see some more We Want Caleb chants from Oklahoma. But, yeah, I'm rolling with Texas.
Hook 'em. All right, we'll see. Like I said, we have no clue what the score is right now, but that is our pre-game predictions. Now, our next game on hand, Ole Miss and Arkansas. So 2 teams that are coming off pretty good games. Let's see here. I have Ole Miss. They had a struggle of a week against Alabama, but it's Alabama. Arkansas, they're also coming off of a big loss. But I think both teams are really I think it's going to be another shootout of a game. Also, I think that's what's going to happen with Texas and OU, another shootout. But a lot of these games are going to be a shootout side of things. I don't see any defense this game either. Arkansas and Ole Miss, but I have Ole Miss in the end. Rachel.
Give me Arkansas. I like the Razorbacks this year. I think that it's just, I understand they lost last week, but this is a good comeback week for them after being shut out against Georgia. But I'm excited to see what they can do.
Remember what happened last year when Arkansas forced several turnovers against this Ole Miss offense. I think Ole Miss kind of had this game highlighted on their schedule, coming off the Alabama performance in which I think they knew they could perform better. I think they're going to make a statement in this game. Now, when I say statement, I don't mean they're going to win by 4 touchdowns. Arkansas is too well coached to lose by that much to an Ole Miss team with a suspect defense. But Arkansas, second straight game on the road coming off the Georgia game. We saw how intimidated the offensive line was for Arkansas early in that game. They can't fall behind this Ole Miss offense because Ole Miss will, if they do fall behind like they did against Georgia, it will get ugly because of this Ole Miss offense. Again, I don't think it's going to be the point spread we saw last weekend with Georgia, 37-0, but I do think Ole Miss wins this game comfortably.
Mark, once again, 2-1, heading to you. Who you got?
I'm tying it up again. I'm going with Arkansas.
Oh.
You know, they're both coming off really bad losses to 2 best teams in college football. But I think Arkansas, they've been rolling very well this season. I have to give it to them.
Besides the Red River Showdown, Penn State and Iowa. At Iowa, we talked about these 2 teams, and both these teams are in a few of our top 4 for the year, so a big game nonetheless. Personally, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I have the Nittany Lions. Penn State takes it at Iowa. Who you got, Rachel?
I got Penn State. I think that Sean Clifford has done very well this season, and I'm excited to see what happens in the future.
The last game Penn State lost was last year against Iowa. But I think Penn State finds a way to go into Kinnick Stadium and get this win. The last 2 times Penn State's traveled to Iowa, it's been classics. They had the walk-off touchdown with no time left in 2017. 2019, they won in a close, low-scoring game, 17-13. It's shaping up to be another low-scoring game where at some point, maybe early in the second half, we might see more punts than points. I think the Penn State Nittany Lions, with their explosive capabilities on offense, with like a receiver like Jahan Dotson, I think with their offense and with the inability for Iowa's offense to prove to college football that they can score without the help of the defense, I think Penn State's going to find a way to limit the turnovers in Kinnick tonight and get the win. It's going to be close, though, low scoring.
Mark, who you got?
I'm lone wolfing. You know, I have Iowa ranked, ending my ranking at number 2. I'm going to go with Iowa. I think their defense will be able to cause their turnovers. And now I will say, if this game was at Penn State, I would probably pick and beat Penn State. This game will be very close.
And I also think that does come into a factor, being where you're at, especially with a defensive team like Iowa. It wouldn't surprise me if Iowa takes it out, but in the end, I still believe in the Nittany Lions. Next up on the list, we have Western Kentucky and UTSA. Personally, Roadrunners are running away with this one.
I agree, Roadrunners. UTSA is on a roll. They beat Illinois earlier this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see them win Conference USA.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw these 2 teams face again in the Conference USA Championship. I think Western Kentucky wins this game. They've been a couple of possessions away from pulling off big-time upsets the last couple of weekends against Power 5 teams. But I think Western Kentucky playing at home and knowing that they're capable of winning a game like this. UTSA is 5-0, a little too good to be true. I know how good UTSA has been this year, and I know how good they're capable of being this year. And even coming into this year, I thought they could do pretty well. But undefeated seems too good to be true for UTSA at this point in the season, midway. I think Western Kentucky finds a way to win. But again, watch for these 2 to face each other again in the CUSA Championship.
So first 2 games, you have a shootout. You have a high-scoring game. Penn State, Iowa, you have a low-scoring game. Is this a higher or low-scoring game?
Higher scoring game. I think you're going to see a little bit of offense and defense, but I think you're going to see a little bit more offense. I think I could see a 35 to 31 kind of score.
Get the popcorn ready. Where you got, Mark?
Yeah.
I've been high on UTSA all year. I think I'm going to roll with UTSA. I think they're going to win Conference USA this year.
Alrighty, off to TCU and Texas Tech. The Red Raiders and the Horned Frogs. Personally, with the display that they put up against Texas last week at TCU, the defense is real. Like, they're actually really good. The special teams really surprised me. Opening kickoff return all the way up to about the 5-yard line, I believe. They're legit. And so I think Tech is struggling at the moment. TCU takes it.
I agree. TCU is going to win this game. I know they just lost to Texas at home, but I really think they got something to prove, and this is the time to do it against an in-state rival with Texas Tech.
Connor, real quick, who you got?
Great game. It's going to be in Lubbock. Great environment, but I don't see TCU starting 0-3 in Big 12, so I think TCU finds a way to get a close win.
Mark, who you got, man?
I'm lone wolfing again. I'm going with Tech. I think it's because it's in Lubbock. The atmosphere is going to be crazy. I think I'm going to go with Tech.
The Red Raiders with live bullets flying. We shall see. UNT and Missouri. We've previewed it all show. UNT, I do not think has enough. It's going to be a close game. That's something that many are not suspecting, but I think Missouri takes it nonetheless.
I agree. I think Missouri is going to take it. If this game was at maybe Apogee would have a chance, but with it being in Missouri, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Missouri. I hope UNT covers the spread, which is 19 at the moment. But yeah, I have the Tigers winning at home.
I think it'll be very close. I have Missouri winning, obviously, but I think UNT can keep it within the touchdown. It's
just ironic how we look at that statistic early on, 260 rushing yards for Missouri, and we could potentially see something like that, but for UNT. So if you're a UNT fan, as we are, we like to see it, but be a good game nonetheless. So catch that one later on, but we have a Texas OU game to go watch. So that'll do it for us. You can pay attention to NTTV Sports at NTTV Sports on our Twitter, YouTube, and all of our social media handles. As for Rachel, Connor, and Mark, and our amazing cast and crew, I'm Zach Fox. Thank you for your time this time. Until next time, God bless.